Good aftermorning, gearheads. Today we're talking about a car that needs no introduction, the BMW E46 M3. But we're not just talking about the M3, we're talking about how far you can push it, the factory rarities that made it legendary, and the video game generation that fell in love with it before they ever sat in one. Let's start with the basics. The E46 M3 rolled out in 2000 powered by the S54 straight 6, 3.2 liters, naturally aspirated, revving to 8,000 revolutions per minute, and screaming out 333 horsepower in a package that felt like a race car with air conditioning. It's one of the last great analog M cars. Hydraulic steering, a manual gearbox that actually rewards you, and a chassis that talks to you through the seat. But stock power was never the ceiling. It was the starting point. Because the S54 engine, while brilliant, is also famously eager to be modified. Enthusiasts have been chasing more power out of this platform for over 2 decades, and there are 2 main paths: forced induction and building the internals to survive it. Superchargers were the first popular route. Companies like VF Engineering and ESS Tuning built centrifugal supercharger kits that bolted onto the S54 and pushed output well past 400, even 450 horsepower, with relatively smooth linear power delivery. Because superchargers spin with the engine, there's none of that laggy hesitation you get from a turbo. On the budget end, a basic bolt-on supercharger kit runs somewhere around $4,000 to $6,000 installed. And that alone gets you into the 450 horsepower range on stock internals. But VF Engineering also offered an extreme kit capable of pushing the platform as high as 1,000 horsepower, and that's a completely different budget. Forged internals, a standalone management system, upgraded fueling and cooling, easily pushing total build cost past $20,000 once everything is accounted for. The trade-off is heat. Supercharged E46 M3s run hot, and cooling upgrades aren't optional, they're mandatory. Then there's turbocharging, which is where things get wild. Single turbo and twin turbo kits from builders like Active Auto Worka can send this engine to 500, 600, even 700 plus horsepower on the right fuel and tune. A basic single turbo kit on the cheaper end starts around $5,000 to $8,000, and that's usually enough for a solid, reliable jump in power. But here's the catch. The S54's factory rod bearings are notoriously weak under sustained high boost. Push past roughly 450 to 500 horsepower without upgrading the bottom end, and you're gambling with catastrophic engine failure. Serious builds pair forced induction with upgraded rod bearings and a stronger oiling system before they ever touch big boost numbers. And once you add a bigger turbo, forged pistons and rods, a standalone ECU, and proper fueling, a full-built turbo setup can easily run $15,000 to $30,000 depending on how far you push it. And here's the thing worth pointing out. Even the cheapest of these bolt-on builds, supercharged or turbocharged, is enough to leave a stock Z4M eating dust. If you caught our head-to-head between the E46 M3 and the Z4M, you know that fight was close on paper. Add any of these power kits to the M3's side of the equation, and it's not close anymore. Now, while enthusiasts were figuring out how to make their M3s faster in their garages, BMW was quietly building the answer at the factory, and that's the CSL. The E46 M3 CSL, Coupe Sport Lightweight, arrived in 2003, and it wasn't just an M3 with a badge and a spoiler. BMW's engineers went after weight like it was the enemy. Out went the standard glass, replaced with thinner panels. Out went the trunk lid, replaced with carbon fiber reinforced plastic. The roof itself was carbon fiber, lowering the center of gravity. The back seats, the sound insulation, even the standard stereo, stripped or lightened. All in, the CSL shed around 110 kilograms compared to a regular M3. But it wasn't only about losing weight. BMW added power too. The S54 and the CSL got a revised intake with an individual throttle body setup and a carbon airbox that BMW nicknamed the Airbox of Power. bumping output to 360 horsepower. It also got a stiffer chassis, wider rear track, staggered forged wheels, and BMW's semi-automatic SMG transmission as the only gearbox option. No manual, which is still debated by purists today. The suspension was reworked specifically for the CSL, and it wore staggered Michelin Pilot Sport Cup tires developed just for this car. In short, the CSL wasn't a trim level, it was BMW's own take on what an amateur tuner dreams of doing, except done properly, from the factory, with a warranty. And if the CSL was BMW's road legal statement, the M3 GTR was their answer to a very specific problem: winning on track. The E46 M3 GTR was born because BMW wanted to dominate the American Le Mans Series GT class, and the naturally aspirated inline-6 S54 simply couldn't compete with the V8-powered competition. So BMW's motorsport division did something unusual. They built a full 4.0-liter V8 specifically for GT racing, producing well over 440 horsepower in race trim, paired with a sequential gearbox, a tube-frame chassis, and full aero. Massive front splitter, towering rear wing, wide fenders. It dominated the ALMS GT class in 2001. But racing regulations required homologation, meaning BMW technically had to build road-going versions to legalize the car for competition. Only a handful of street GTRs were ever built, making it one of the rarest and most mythical M3 variants that officially exists, even though almost nobody has actually seen one in person. And that brings us to how most of us actually met the M3 GTR. Not on a racetrack, but on a PlayStation 2 controller. Because if you were a kid in the early 2000s, chances are the M3 GTR wasn't just a rare homologation special, it was the car. Need for Speed, Most Wanted, released in 2005, put the M3 GTR front and center as the villain's car, Razor's car, that silver body with blue side decals, the one you spent the entire game chasing down and eventually stealing for yourself. For an entire generation, that in-game rivalry was their first real exposure to this car's existence, long before they understood what homologation even meant. And honestly, that's personal for me too. Mr. Y-Stick has his own childhood memories tangled up in this game. Racing down those in-game highways, restarting the chase a dozen times just to finally pin down Razor and take his car, that silver and blue M3 GTR became a symbol before it became a fact. That's the strange power of car culture. Sometimes a video game teaches you more about automotive history than a spec sheet ever could, because it makes you feel it first and ask questions later. So between garage-built superchargers and turbos chasing raw numbers, BMW's own lightweight masterpiece in the CSL, and the racing legend that became a childhood icon through a PS2 game, the E46 M3 isn't just one car. It's three completely different stories about the same platform, and honestly, that's exactly why we're still talking about it more than 20 years later. And here's the part that always surprises people. You don't even need the $20,000 build to make that Z4M rivalry a non-contest. Something as simple as a carbon airbox and a proper set of sticky tires is enough to close the gap and put the M3 ahead. No forced induction, no forged internals, no standalone ECU, just better breathing and better rubber, and that lighter, more track-focused Z4M suddenly isn't so untouchable anymore. Alright, that's it for today's ride. Good after evening, everyone. If you enjoyed this one, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment with what you want to see next. Simple visuals, big ideas. Join the stick side, and I'll see you in the next one.